Waterways, Habanas, in the waterways. Okay. Today we're going to start on the in the middle of Daf Kuf Ches, in the middle of 118, Amud Aleph. The words are Haseicher Lasisime Beteven. And the traditional Gemara is in the middle of the page, but it probably has a new piece, and if you have a translation. We thank Hashem that they're able to learn Torah every day. So we're learning, we should have this immediately. We're learning Lili Nishmas, Zava Goldabas Baruch Binyamin, and Shalasar Ben Benzion, and the first name for David Ben Sarah, and Gedalia Getzel Eliezer, Peget Sipara. Okay. Okay, Bezos Hashem, tonight we'll have a siyum. Hopefully we'll finish till the end today, and we'll just leave the last few lines. Otherwise, we'll learn tonight, whatever it is. And tomorrow, Bezos Hashem, we'll have start a new Masechta. So even the world is starting the new Masechta today. A day late. Haseicher lasis imay beteven. Going back to the Mishnah, we're quoting the Mishnah. If someone hires a worker to gather straw with him, comes time for payment, he tells the worker says, pay me. Tells the worker, why just keep the straw that you collected? So the Mishnah said that ain't shayman like. You can tell him that, no, you have an obligation to pay me money, not to pay me this. Now, where do we get that obligation from? Rashi mentioned that we get it from the pasuk that says, Bal Tal and Schar, that you can't delay payment, that you have to pay him what you made up to pay him. And when he understood, he was getting a check, he was getting some money, and not some merchandise that he doesn't need. Right? Okay. So Gemara says that this case is exactly like the other case in the Mishnah. The other case of the Mishnah was when a wall fell down and it fell into someone's garden, and the person says, clean up your debris. And the guy says, why? It's a gift for you. You can keep all the stones. So he says, we don't let him say that. He has to clean it up. But if the person goes ahead and takes it, then the owner can't come back, and that's what we said. The owner can't come back and say, okay, here's the payment for your expenses of cleaning it up, and now give me my stones. It's too late. That's what we said. Which is the same thing we said by the worker. If the worker accepts the payment of straw, which he doesn't have to, but if he accepts the payment of straw, the owner can't come back and say, oh, I finally got together the money, here's your payment, now give me the straw. The guy can say no. It's too late. Well, the Gemara says it's shricha. Both of these cases seem to be exactly the same, but nevertheless, it's necessary for the Gemara to teach each of these. The Yashmin al-Hachkamaisif would only say the case of the wall that collapsed into the garden, and there's debris all over the place. Because when the owner of the wall tells to the owner of the garden, okay, it's a gift for you. Ein shayman layan, we say that we don't listen to the owner, we require him to clean it up. That's because he doesn't have any money by the other person, which means he doesn't owe him money that he's telling him, here's your money, I'm paying you back. But here, where he owes him money, we would say that he's allowed to say that, take your money. Because there's an expression that says, from the owner of the property, you take, you'll take even bran. That's when it comes to collecting a payment, take whatever he gives you, and take whatever he gives you and run. So if, let's say, we're saying like this, if the owner of the garden was owed money by the owner of the wall, then maybe we would. And then the owner of the wall tells him that, look, I just paid you back. Take the stones. They're your stones. Then would have thought that maybe that he would be able to say that. And I would thought that maybe he would be able to say that when there's a worker, that he says, take the straw that you got.
Doesn't matter if this worker accepted this straw because she can this might be
Right. No, it doesn't matter. Well, right now we're saying that he's not accepting it. He's demanding real payment, and the person can't. What the Mishnah is telling me is the person has to go and get him actual money, whatever they made up originally that he was going to be paid in. So that's why the Mishnah needs to say the second case. If it only say the first case, I wouldn't have known the second case. I would have thought the second case he would be acceptable to say, here, keep the straw. And if it would say only the case of the worker, so then there is a second part to this Mishnah where the person says, or the person actually keeps it, he takes it, and then the guy comes in and says, I changed my mind. Here's your money, and I want it back. So it's say maybe that he can't come back afterwards to take it after brings him money. That's because he owed him money, and that's why it's a valid transaction that he actually gives it to him. Aval hacha, but here I would have liked to say aval hasam, but aval hacha, but here both of them are hacha. Aval hacha, the less they gabe, where he doesn't owe him money. I could say that maybe he can return and say that I would really like my stones back, because that transaction wasn't a valid transaction when he says just keep the stones. He never owed him money. Just gave him a gift, probably just to postpone the labor that he doesn't want to do. He says, "Oh, keep it," and then he shows up. He says, "No, here's the money. Here's the money for your expenses. I'd like the stones." Could have thought that maybe, yeah, he's allowed to take his stones. It is really his stones. He was never really moichel those stones. That's why it has to tell me both cases. One to tell me the first part of the case, one to tell me the second part of the case. Okay, now we go back where we say to the worker, we say, take as payment the labor, take the straw that you collected, and that will be your payment. So the Mishnah said, "In Shaimanai, we don't listen to that claim that take the straw." He actually has to pay him the money that they made up that he was going to pay. Problem is, Vatani, we have another brisa that says Shaimanai, that we do listen to him if he says take the straw that you collected. We have one brisa that says he can't say take the straw. You have another brisa that says that he can. That's a contradiction. Rav Nachman comes in to resolve the contradiction. He says, like kasha, it's not really a contradiction, because two ways of answering a contradiction. You either say it's machlekes, you say it's a different scenario. There he says it's a different scenario. It depends. Was he hiring to do work for himself, or was he hiring him to do work for someone else? If he's hiring him to do work for himself, then he would not be able to say that, because he has an obligation to pay him. You have the rule of you should not withhold payment that would require to when he hires him for himself. And we won't apply that rule if he's hiring him to do work for someone else. Mar says, Amalei Rabba or Rav Nachman, Rabba or Rava. There in the Bach adjusted to Rava. Yeah, it's more. I think it's more common. Rava says to Rav Nachman, "B'shalei my time." He's introducing his question, but he introduces his question with a lead up question. Starts with the question. So B'shalei my time. What's the reason why he can't tell the laborer just take what you collected and consider that a payment? The person can say, that's my wages is upon you, your responsibility to pay me. So if that's the case, when he tells him to do work for his friend, here we're talking about a guy that calls a gardener. He says, I want you to mow the lawn, and instead of telling him his own lawn, he points to his neighbor's lawn.
Wow.
He doesn't like the way his neighbor's lawn looks. And then he just hires a gardener, and then the gardener comes for payment. So the guy that hired him has to pay him, and the guy that hired him and just paid him now goes to the owner of the property and says, "I got your lawn mowed, and pay me for the expenses." So the guy's going to tell him, he's going to say, "Look, I could have gotten it done much cheaper than that, so I'll only pay you the price that I would have gotten it done myself, which is much cheaper." So he has to pay him what's called masha haneo. The benefit that I got was that I got it done, but for me that was only a $20 benefit, not a $40 benefit, because I could have gotten it done cheaper.
It's like those people at the traffic light that just start washing your car and everything.
Yeah, so I guess you have to pay them, unless you refuse it on the spot.
No, they don't give you an option.
They don't give you an option; they'll break your windshield.
Rabbi, this is similar to like when the animal goes into another field, it consumes like these expensive foods, but he would feed the animal like cheap food. So he would just pay back the amount that the cheap food
Exactly. Yeah. So it says like this: the Tanya was started in a brisa. This is a question that Rabbi asked of Nachman. If someone hires the workers to do work for himself, but he points to his friend's field, he has to give full payment, even though he didn't work in his field, but he hired him to do work in his friend's field. Then he goes back to the balabayas and the owner of the field, and takes payment, whatever the benefit was. Now, so the question is like this: what's the difference if you hire me to work in your field, if you hire me to work in the friend's field? Both of those cases, you're the one that hired me, you have to pay me. So if that's the case, if you can't tell me that just keep the straw in the first case where you hired me to work for you, you can't tell me keep the straw in the second case. Because both of them is obligation for you to pay. And when the obligation to pay means that he has to pay what they made up you, whatever currency he was going to pay in.
Before you mention the difference between the shliach and the actual employer.
There's a difference if there's a shliach. Yeah. But what the difference was when it comes to delaying payment, withholding the wages, if it's a shliach, no one violates that. You want to say over here that he's a shliach, and therefore that obligation won't be there. That's an interesting point. Here, Naftali or Daniel, the Hillel's asking that when someone makes a shliach to hire a worker, then the laws of baltalan, of withholding wages, don't apply. So Hillel's asking that this person here is considered a shliach to do work for his friend's field, to do work. He's like a shliach of the owner of that property, and so the rules of withholding wages shouldn't apply. Which means that that same rule of withholding wages in that halacha is also the halacha that you have to pay what currency you made up to pay.
Can you appoint yourself a shliach?
Oh, yeah. Can you appoint yourself a shliach? You're not really a shliach from him. You're the one that's obligated to pay. He never made you a shliach. Maybe that's the difference. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so Ella Amar Rav Nachman, to resolve this question of 1 second, you have an obligation of payment on both of those cases. So how do you resolve the contradiction where we allow him to say, take your straw as your payment? It depends. Is he telling him to do work in his own field, or is he telling him to do work for hefker? How does he do work for hefker? Tells him that I want you to watch those this hefker stuff, or to collect before we get to the case of watching. I want you to collect from hefker. So from hefker, he can tell him to keep it. Esvi Rebbe Rav Nachman. Rava says to Rav Nachman, Metzias Peilatzmai, that if a worker finds a lost object, is he allowed to keep it or does he have to give it to his employer? So it says that if he finds a lost object, he keeps it. Amasai, when does he keep it? That's if the employer tells him, I want you to plow with me today, I want you to weed with me today. So he has a specific job, and his job was not to collect lost objects, right? His job was to do a specific work, and if he happened to find it, so that wasn't part of his job, he keeps it. But if he tells him, I want you to work for me today, he doesn't give him a specific job. It means everything that he does is the work for the employer. Then he finds a lost object that belongs to the owner. If that's the case, we're talking about a case where you don't have to return it. There was no, it was just like a bar of gold where no one has any sign on it, no simon. They're all the same. Right. So, what Rav is asking Rav Nachman is that even if he tells him to do work in Hefker, but the work that he does becomes not Hefker and it belongs to the owner. And it doesn't belong to him, it belongs to the owner. So it's exactly like telling him, I want you to do work for me. Because everything that he acquires belongs to everything that it's really back to the owner. So both cases are back to being the same case. So why is there a difference? Rav Nachman says like Kash kam bagba kam b'habata. The first case where we don't listen to him is where he tells him, I want you to pick it up. Which means that the owner is acquiring it. Both of them are talking about Hefker. I want you to go and collect straw from this open area. So in the Mishnah where he says that he can't tell the worker, I want you to keep the straw as your payment, that's because he's telling him, I want you to collect it, to lift it up. Now, when he lifts it up, it belongs automatically to the owner. So then he tells the owner, he says, no, you can't tell me to keep this. This is your stuff. You told me you're going to pay money. The other case is where he says, I don't want you to pick it up. I want you just to watch it. I want to make sure no one else takes it. So if that's the case, so then the owner never acquired it. It's still Hefker. So then he says, take some of the straw for your, as your payment. So it wasn't his. It's not his friend's. Doesn't he have an obligation to pay because he hired him? What's the difference? Do you have any comment in there why there should be a difference? I mean, the fact is that it's still labor.
Well, the difference is the hay itself, right? In one case, the hay is his, the other case, the hay is still has.
Where the laborer picks up ownerless straw, since he acquires it on behalf of his employer, the employer is responsible for his wages. In our case, since the labor benefited the employer is liable to pay for his wages. But in the case of a laborer who's merely watching some ownerless straw, since he does not acquire it on behalf of the employer is not required to pay him. For watching is not a valid act of acquisition. Indeed, if labor to perform any act with the straw, which is not classified as an act of acquisition, hired to push the straw down from the same law would apply. Okay. He's making it, I mean, the Gemara is making it look that if you hire someone to do work on something that doesn't belong to anyone, and there's no acquisition, that he doesn't need to pay him. Which is strange. I tell someone to stand in front of the school to watch be a guard. So, okay, it's my school, let's say, so I have to pay him. Tell him I want you to stand in front of the park or the street or something where it doesn't belong to anyone, ownerless. I just want you to stand there, I'll pay you. I don't have to pay him.
Just wants to get out of his
Yeah, but that's his job. Whatever you hire him to do is his job. The Gemara's making it look like there's no responsibility to pay. Yeah, I don't know.
Discussion just about whether you pay with the straw or not.
Yeah, if he can tell him to just keep the straw. Now, but that the basis of not being allowed to tell him that he can keep the straw, basis of that is, does he have an obligation to pay? According to Rashi, Rashi says on the top of the page, see the Rashi ain't Shaimanlai? It's on the bottom of the wide lines that on the top of the page. There's 4 lines on the top. Rashi says, Afagav the b'chol duchti es shava kesef kekesef. Even though we always hold that any personality has a monetary value and could be used as a payment, but when it comes to a worker, there's an exception to that. He can't delay wages. My da'asni bahadei or behedya mashma. Whatever they bahadei probably. Whatever condition they made up, whatever they made up, they're going to pay. That's what he has to pay. So it has to do with labor, and the Gemara is making it look like it has to do with ownership. Okay. Question. Huh?
That does become an acquisition.
Yeah, you're going further. That's the Gemara further. Don't worry about that. Okay. There's 2 versions to this Gemara. One is habata, one is chabata. Habata means to look, and chabata means to knock down. Rashi interestingly says that if you're not making a kinyan by lifting it up, but you're pushing it off an animal or something, or you're pushing it down, then that's not considered a kinyan. So there's 2 ways of reading Rashi. You could read Rashi that Rashi holds that that's just considered habata, and the same thing would apply whether you're looking or if you're pushing it down. The main thing is, so as long as you're not lifting it up. So it's interesting when they tell you make a kinyan and they say lift it up, it's not the holding it up, it's the movement, it's the upward motion. Because they tell you to push it down, so then you don't acquire, according to this. But there is a possibility that what Rashi is really doing is Rashi is accepting both versions of this, or habata and chabata. Chabata would mean to push it down, and then that would be a different story. But okay. Amar Rabba. Rabba says, habata behefker tanaihi. There's a machlekes. We just said that when you tell someone to watch something, that you don't acquire it. It's actually a machlekes. If habata is kind of Reb Daniel, is Shai still there?
Shai is in the room.
I don't know if you remember, Rav Mordechai Eliyahu came to Earl Chanan. Were you there when he came?
No.
Oh, okay. When he came, I was those years when we were there together. So 27 years ago, probably. So he spoke about this, the first Taisvus, the first Gemara here in Bava Metzia, which discusses habata behefker, if looking. The first page talks about if looking acquires, and then he went to this last page of Gemara. It's interesting that the beginning is connected to that. He spoke about the Rebbe. He says the Rebbe looks at something and he acquires it. That was his. He looks at a yid and the yid becomes his. That was his. Okay, so there's a machlekes if habata behefker is kaina. If you look at something, if that's an acquisition, we always said that you looked at it, it's not yours. This is like what kids would say. You know, they see a balloon or something, they say that's mine. It says no, it's not. It's mine. So why is it yours? He says because I saw it first. And the other one says no. Well, I took it first. You were just looking at it, and I took it. So one opinion says no. The looking at it was enough, and he acquired it. So the Tanan was taught in the Mishnah. Shemrei sviche shvius. There's people, watchmen that are watching the growth of Shemitah. And why are they watching this? Because they need grain for the Omer, which is the offering that's brought on the second day of Pesach. They need barley, or they're watching the bread, the grain, the wheat for the 2 loaves of bread that they're going to bring on Shavuos. So they have to watch it to make sure no one takes this. This is designated for the carbon. So who pays them? It says they take payment from where we take the money for the karbanos. We take the money. This is part of the expenses for the sacrifice. They take it from those boxes that they had. Rabbi Yossi says, no, this is done by a watchman. That's a shem rechinam. He volunteers to do this. He doesn't get paid to do watch. Amrullah, they said to him, Ata Imerkain, you say so. Ein Bain Mishal. Yeah, it's really, if you say so. Yeah, it's missing the word if. Probably Imata Imer. If you say so, then Ein Bain Mishal Tzibur, then it's not going to be a community sacrifice. It's going to be his private sacrifice, which means that they're saying that the fact that he's watching it is an acquisition. Looking at something is an acquisition, acquires it. I looked at it, I acquired it.
But the barley is owned by someone.
But here it's not, because it's Shemitah. But really, no one owns it.
So it's nobody owns it.
Yeah.
No, 44. That's exactly what you mentioned.
Yeah. Well, what's the machlokes here between the Tanakam and Rabbi Yossi? Rabbi Yossi is Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta. Goes like this. Tanakama Savar, the Tanakama holds about the Behafka Kani. That if you look at something, you acquire it. And therefore Biyavile Agra in Ilailai. Therefore, if they're paying him, so then he becomes a worker and he doesn't acquire it for himself. He's acquiring it on behalf of the people, of the community. But if he's not being paid, just a volunteer, then he may be acquiring it for himself. Rabbi Yossi says, no, looking at something doesn't acquire it, so he's just watching it. When the community comes and takes it, after the Kazachibe, then the other first people that are acquiring it. What is it when there was an expression over here? You say so, the sages tell to Rabbi Yossi. If you say so, then it's not a community offering. What are they telling him? According to your halacha, that the person doesn't get paid that watches, then according to our opinion about that, then it's not going to be a community offering, it's going to be a private offering because he's the owner of that. Amarava. So we think now we have a machlekes of habata behefker kani. We have machlekes tanaim. Someone looks at something, does he acquire it?
It's going to be hard to verify. Oh, you looked at it. No, I didn't.
Right.
The binoculars, a sniper.
You see, I think the way we understand this is that when you look at something, you don't change anything in an item. When you look at something, the only thing is the light reflects back in your eye. The only thing that changes is something in your brain, is the pictures that your brain collects of everything that you see. It changes in your head, not in the item. Usually when you kind of something, so you show some sort of ownership, you lift it up, you did something, you changed it, you dug a fence, you dug a hole, and you set up you locked the door. There's something that changes. It's changing an item. So here, the way that Habata Behefka, looking at it is like when you look at it, something changes at what you look at. That's that opinion. That no, it says something changes in you, something changes in that.
The quantum mechanics, quantum
Yeah.
physics.
Jeff is saying something like that. That the observation can change it. They have this thing
Heidelberg's cat or something.
drop a ball and it could fall this way or that way. There's something was totally random, and the observation maybe could switch it.
When you make a kinyan like a yama, whatever, any object, you put it back down and then someone else takes it. So it's like you're giving up ownership.
Yeah, well, that is That
Is
is
that like a
it's
simon
it's
kind
it's
of?
just a simon. It's an active acquisition. Yeah, it's an act. It's called the tinyan sudar. You lift up the cloth.
This method of obtaining hasn't been mentioned before.
Right,
You
right.
spoke
It's only
about-
over here. This is
You
it.
spoke about the movable.
Right.
Not movable. None of them said, oh, you
Right.
can get in.
Right. That's why it was just, it's going to get rejected now. This is Rabba's opinion. But now Rava comes in. I'm a Rava loy. The kuli alma about to have actually, it's going to get rejected in a second. Here it gets, first it gets strengthened, then it's going to, the ikadam, we will reject it. First it gets accepted. Everyone holds that really looking at something acquires it. We have a different machlekes. Even the Tanakama holds, I'm sorry, even Rabbi Yossi holds that he's going to acquire it when he looks at it. So how could Rabbi Yossi say that he volunteers? If he's not paid, then maybe it's a private offering. The answer is that he's going to give it over to the community with full, willingly. So it goes like this. The Rabbanan Sabri Yavin Leyagra that we have to pay him Vilay. If we don't pay him Cheshin Shemaliyim Srim Yaf Yaf, and maybe he's not going to give it over to the community willingly. Rabbi Yossi Sabri, Rabbi Yossi holds Cheshin Shemaliyim Srim Yaf Yaf. That's not our concern. I don't have, for sure he's going to want to give it to the community, even though he could have acquired it by just looking at it. So what does it mean when it says that according to you, then it's not going to be a community offering? According to your opinion, that he doesn't get paid. According to the way we view that, the but we have a concern that maybe he's still going to want to keep it. He's going to say, it would be a real good schus for me if the whole sacrifice of the Aimer was my sacrifice. I'll have like my plaque, my pledge. It's like my personal aliyah, that I got. It's better than the community. I bought them after Yaina. He's going to want to keep it. Ikadamri is that would be according to the opinion that about the Befka Kani, that it is an acquisition there. Those that say Rav Amatikoliam about the Befka Laikani, everyone holds that just looking at something is not an acquisition. And there's this totally side concern over here that some strong people may show up and just take everything away and say, "Oh, this is ours." It's just like bandits. They may come in and just take it. The Tanakama Sarv, so what do they do? We give this guy a huge payment so that everyone knows that this guy is a paid watchman and he's watching it on behalf of, just to make a rumor, just to make everyone aware that there's a salary here and that there's a job and that this belongs to Hektish, so people won't mix in. He wears a uniform, right? Rabbi Yossi says, "Leitakina, they never made such an institution. We're not concerned about bandits coming in and taking it. So the bandits apparently will respect the fact that it belongs to Hektish." Mata Aimer, what does it mean when it says that according to you, then it's going to be a problem? What they mean to say is midvarecha, according to you, that you don't take a payment. Lidvareno, according to us, that we have a concern. Then ein ban mishal tzibur. According to us, that we have to pay, that we say you do have to pay, comes out as a very interesting. This is totally different. According to you, that you don't have to pay, that he doesn't take payment. According to us, that he does have to take payment, then all the sacrifices are mixed in one individual's money more than everyone else's. And it's possible, everyone gives a half a shekel, but it's possible that this guy has more money in there than everyone else, because according to us, he was supposed to be paid. According to you, he's meichel that payment. He doesn't take it, which means that there's sacrifices that are going to be coming during the year, which are going to be specifically his and not from the community. Because he was meichel that payment in the thing, he's going to end up with more percentage of the sacrifices. It could be nayo that when Ravin came, he said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan that this was the pshat, that there was a concern that maybe the bandits were going to show up and they were going to take it, so we had to pay him, and then there was a machlekes. If we don't pay him, or if the guy doesn't take the payment, doesn't mean that he has extra money in the community thing, extra percentage, which is going to affect the way the fairness, the way it's spread out, that ownership of the sacrifices. Okay, the Mishnah says, if someone takes out fertilizer into the public area. Now, zevel doesn't mean specifically manure. That's what it says. So the way it works is like this: a mitzi. The person puts it out, and mazavel. But the guy that needs the fertilizer comes immediately and takes it away.
Whoa.
So you have to arrange for pickup before you put it out. That's basically what the Mishnah is saying. Otherwise, it could cause damage. So you put it out, but it has to be arranged that it's picked up right away. You can't soak tit is like a plaster or a clay in the public area, because it has to sit for a few days and it could cause damage. You can't make the bricks, you can't dry them in a public area. I don't know. Rashi tells me that they would make an X or a cross sign in the in each one. Not sure. I guess it would crack or something. I guess no. It means somehow they put down, and they put down dirt, and then they would make lines in it that would be the separate bricks would be those lines, something like that. Okay. But you're allowed to mix it, and that would be like the cement truck comes. You're allowed to mix it right there, and then you would put it directly into the construction for immediate use only. That's what it would be, for immediate use. But not for bricks, I guess, because that would take longer, or that you can do somewhere else. Someone that's building something in the public area. So Hamevi Avanim, maybe the one that brings the stones, and then the builder immediately takes it and builds it. So it has to be set up beforehand that there's no delay in this construction, that they shouldn't just drop it off and then just leave it, and then there should be no negligence. Bim hizik, but if there is a cause, if there is any damage, Mishali Maser hizik, then they have to pay for the damages. Those people that are doing this construction. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, he's able to. He has time to fix things up. He doesn't have to pay for damages. He has whatever he's doing. Construction takes time, and that's how long it takes. And people have to be careful. And if he has the rights to even fix up his construction for 30 days, so then he's pater for all those 30 days for damages. These laws would apply to Israel, or to these laws are specifically to Israel because it has to do with Ezra. Like Rabbi Yehuda, let's say our Mishnah it doesn't follow the view of Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya was taught in a brisa. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer b'shasi tzas zvolam ad meitzi zivul shusram and tzevik kol shleish miyam kadesh enisha paragladim ragli behema shamanasken inchol Yeshua Yisrael asaret. Rabbi Daniel, when last time we spoke about this, you sent me a link about that. Rabbi Yehuda says that there was a season when people were allowed to take their straw, their fertilizer, into the public area, and people would step on it, and it would get crushed, and it would turn into better compost, and because they would crush it, so it would decompose, and then they would take it back. And they were allowed to do that. They were allowed to put it in the public area because everyone's traveling anyway. And this was one of the institutions that Yeshua set up when people came into the land, that they should be allowed to do this. They should be able to get free fertilizer by putting their straw in and let all the cars and wagons make it. I told you, Reb Daniel, that about my idea of putting wires down on the highways to make electricity for everyone. Someone said no, and then you showed me that people made money off it. It's one of my many ideas that I lost money on. Okay. Yeah. So the Gemara says now that it doesn't seem like it fits with Rabbi Yehuda, because according to Rabbi Yehuda, you're allowed to do this. According to our Mishnah, you're not allowed to do this. So, right, how do we see from our Mishnah that you're not allowed? Because it says if it causes damage, then you're chayav. Right? Our Mishnah is clear, you're not allowed to. Rabbi Yehuda says probably if it causes, we don't know what Rabbi Yehuda says, but we're assuming Rabbi Yehuda says if it causes damage, then you're pater, because you're allowed to. What do you mean you're allowed to? You're allowed to means that if it causes damage, you're pater. The Gemara says no. That's an assumption. Rabbi Yehuda never said that. Afilu Tamer Rabbi Yehuda could say that our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. And Rabbi Yehuda, Shem Hizek Chayav L'Shalim. Rabbi Yehuda would agree that if it causes damage, you're chayav, exactly like our Mishnah. So why did Mishnah say that you have to be careful, you can't leave it there and all of this? Mishnah is just giving you an Eitzah Tova, not saying that you're not allowed. It's saying, it's giving you good advice. It says if you put it there, you may end up being chayav. Right? You may end up being chayav. Okay. Like Rabbi Yehuda says that you're allowed to, and if it causes damage, then you're chayav to pay. So our Mishnah says better not to do it. Not that you're not allowed to. It would agree with Rabbi Yehuda that you're allowed. Vatanan, the problem is that we have a Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Rabbi Yehuda ben Chanukah. Rabbi Yehuda agrees. This is a Mishnah in Baba Kama. But there was a wagon that was driving by and it gets caught, catches fire, straw catches fire on a candle that was outside. So the owner of the candle has to pay, except if it was a Hanukkah candle, then the owner is exempt. So Rabbi Yehuda agrees the owner is exempt by Ner Chanukah, which means that if whenever you have permission to do something, if it causes damage, then you're going to be exempt. So if you have permission to put the fertilizer outside, which is what Rabbi Yehuda says, then you should probably be exempt as well. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't say if it causes damage if you're exempt or chayav. We're making up that Rabbi Yehuda would hold chayav to make him fit with our Mishnah. Problem is we have a third Mishnah where Rabbi Yehuda says that you're exempt if it's a Ner Chanukah, which would mean that anytime you have permission to do something, you should be exempt, which would make all these two Mishnayos not aligned with the Mishnah. So it says my lav versus Bezdin. It must mean that anytime you have permission, Bezdin allows it. It's you're exempt. Where it says loy rishus the mitzvah. Over here it doesn't mean just allowance. Over here it's allowance that it's recommended because that's the mitzvah. So when we recommend you to do it as a commandment, so then you're exempt, but not if it's just allowed. There's a difference here between two types of allowed. One is allowed and recommended, and one is allowed just like, yeah, you're allowed, begrudgingly allowed. Vatanya, 1 second. We have a brisa that says that whenever there's a machlekes, Tanakama holds that whenever we said that you're allowed to put things into public property and to make the public property dirty because that's going to benefit you. So nevertheless, if it causes damage, you're chayav. And Rabbi Yehuda says no, you're pater, which means that Rabbi Yehuda holds that if there's permission, not only recommendation but just permission, then you're exempt. Rather, it's more clear to say that our Mishnah does not fit with Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, Abaya, Amar Abaya says Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon Kulas Virlu. This is Abaya, but he does all over Shas. He throws together a bunch of sages. He calls it Shita. They all have the same reasoning and the same law. They all agree. Now it's usually not 100% precise, but they all. When he does this, actually, it comes out that the halacha is not like any of them. That's a rule. We have a rule somewhere, I forget where, but ein halacha kashita. The halacha is not like all of these opinions. As you can say, why is Abaya doing this, throwing them all together? Is he trying to say that they're the halacha or they're not the halacha? He's trying to say that they're not the halacha. So they all hold the same thing. That what is it? Anywhere where the sages said that you're exempt, that you have permission to do this, and it causes damage, you're exempt from payment. Where do we see this? Well, Rabbi Yehuda Adam and Rabbi Yehuda, we see this, that he doesn't fit with our Mishnah, and if it causes damage, you're exempt. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, the Tanan Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, he says, in our Mishnah, he said that he gave him 30 days to fix his work, which means all that time. What does Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel mean to say? that, or during that time, if it causes damage, he's going to be exempt from any damages. The builder. Reb Shimon Ditanan, what does Reb Shimon say? This is a Gemara Bava Basra. So a person has an oven. So he has to distance his oven from the ceiling 4 amas. Can't have it close to the ceiling, it causes a fire. Let's say he lives on the 2nd floor. So then he needs the fire was done on the floor of the oven. Then he has to set up a different sort of floor. What he needs to do is he needs plaster on the floor 3 tvachim thick to be able to have fire on the floor. It shouldn't cause damage to the ceiling of the person under him. Ubechira, if it's not a real tanner, if it's a smaller oven, then only tefach. He needs 1 tefach of insulation. If it causes damage, then he has to pay for the damages, even though he had the rights to do that. But he still has to pay. But why did they give you these measurements? Why did they set up a code? The zoning laws. Why did they set it up? Because if it does cause damage, you're exempt. You have someone that chisels the stones, that cuts the stone cutter. He cuts this probably from the quarry. He cuts them out and he gives the stones to the chiseler. At that point, when he hands them over, Hasas is chayev. The chiseler is now chayev for any damages that those stones cause. Hasas is shmasal chamar. He gives it over to the chamar. He's the one that the donkey driver that carries it away from the mountain. Then a chamar chayev. Then the donkey driver is now chayev because he handed it over. And now it's his obligation. A chamar shmasal katef. The donkey driver gives it over to the porter, the guy that takes it on his shoulders to carry the stones, to the guys that lift it. Then a katif chayiv, so he handed over that responsibility. A katif shmasal banoi, the porter gives it over to the builder. Then a banoi chayiv, then the builder's obligated. A banoi shmasal adrichal, adrichal is the master builder. The builder gives it over to the master builder. He comes around and checks it over. Adrichal chayiv, now he's chayiv. Miniach heaven al adimas v'zika. You put a stone on top of a dimas is a row. Put it on top of the row. And it causes damage. Now they're all chayav. It's funny. They were getting out of their responsibility the whole time, and now when it gets to the end, now they're all chayav because of damage. But Tanya, 1 second, we have a brisa that says achron chayav kulam peturim. Only the last one's chayav. The rest are exempt. Just like kasha, kam b'schiris, kam b'kablanis. It depends. If each one was hired to do their job, then each one does the job, then they become exempt. But if it was a project, they hire them to do the project, and they split it up, and each one does a part of the project. But ultimately, when at the end, if it's not set right, the end of the project is everyone is responsible for that, to make sure that it comes out. If it's kablanas, if it was done as a project, then they're all going to be responsible at the end, even though in the middle they'll be exempt. Okay, guess we'll leave it here. Metzia Hashem, tonight we'll learn downstairs. After Ma'ariv, it's going to be close to 9. We'll finish this piece of Gemara and we'll have a siyum.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Great day.
Thank you.
Tomorrow, bring your Baba Basra.
Yeah.
Baba Basra is a 5-6 months project. So, yeah, get ready. You want to start on time.
We can do it.
Okay.
Have a good day.
Okay.